Take a quick pause. Did you know that over 90% of you watching haven't hit the subscribe button yet? If you're enjoying this video, take a second to subscribe and hit the like button. It helps us bring you more gripping stories every day. Also, we'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments so we can see how far our stories are reaching. Your support really keeps us going. Now, let's jump back into the video. They met when they were just teenagers, back when love felt like an endless summer. He was 17, working part-time at his uncle's garage, and she was 16, selling smoothies at a kiosk in the mall. Their connection was instant, a kind of magnetic pull that neither of them could explain. In a small town where everyone knew everyone, their love story bloomed quietly but deeply. By the time they were both in their early 20s, they were married. A small wedding, barely 50 guests, but full of laughter, family, and the promise of forever. They didn't have much, but they had each other. That was enough. Their first apartment had cracked walls and an unreliable heater, but she turned it into a home with candles and thrift store furniture. He worked long shifts, first at the garage, then eventually landing a more stable job as a logistics coordinator. She studied part-time while working admin at a medical office. Slowly, their life grew. Better jobs, a used SUV, then a modest home in the suburbs. 2 kids followed, both boys, 2 years apart. He always thought their life was ordinary in the best possible way. They weren't flashy, didn't travel much, and didn't live beyond their means. Their date nights became family nights. Their weekend plans revolved around soccer games and laundry. But there was a comfort in the routine, a warmth in knowing who was waiting for you at the end of the day. But looking back, he couldn't pinpoint when exactly that warmth started to cool. Maybe it started with the new friend, Tina. His wife had met her through the PTA. They clicked instantly, and at first, he was happy she had someone to confide in. Being a mom could be isolating, he knew that. He never questioned the sudden dinners out or late-night calls. Tina was loud, always laughing, full of wild stories. He figured it was good for his wife to have someone like that. Then came the small changes. New clothes, stylish, more fitted, not just for work, but even at home. Lingerie tags in the trash that didn't look familiar. Perfume she hadn't worn in years. He noticed, of course, but he said nothing. After all, wasn't it normal for someone to rediscover themselves in their 30s? Then came the missed dinners. Tina and I are having wine at her place. We're catching a movie. I'm staying over. We're both too tired to drive. He told himself it was harmless. He wanted to believe her. Still, there were other things. Bank statements that didn't quite add up. Charges from restaurants he'd never heard of at odd hours. Uber rides in neighborhoods nowhere near Tina's place. He would ask her casually, "How was dinner last night?" And she would smile, give a vague answer, and change the subject. One night, their youngest had a stomach bug. She wasn't home. He tried calling, no answer. He texted, no reply. At 2:14 a.m., her message finally came. "Sorry, phone died. Was already asleep." But something gnawed at him. He hadn't heard any noise in the background when she finally picked up later. Her voice sounded too alert, not like someone who'd just been woken up. He started paying attention. He checked her phone one night when she was in the shower. It was locked, but the call log on their shared phone plan told a different story. A number he didn't recognize had been calling frequently, sometimes multiple times a day. He tried calling it once, his hand trembling. A man answered. "Hello?" Just that. Nothing more. His heart pounded. He hung up. He didn't say anything. Not yet. Instead, he started gathering little pieces of evidence, like someone tiptoeing through a maze of glass shards. He found a voicemail one day. She hadn't deleted it. A man's voice, low, calm. "I miss you. I'll be thinking of you tonight." That was it. No name, no obvious context. But it said everything. The next few weeks were a blur of watching, noticing, pretending. He couldn't eat properly, couldn't sleep. At night, he would lie next to her, her back turned, and wonder how long it had been since she'd stopped seeing him. Really seeing him. When had she started lying with such ease? How long had she been going to someone else? He started watching their kids more closely, too. Were they being affected? Were they safe? One Saturday, she announced another girls' night. He nodded, said nothing. But this time, after she left, he followed her. It felt like something out of a movie. His hands were clammy on the steering wheel. He stayed 3 cars back, watched her car take a left when Tina's place was to the right. She pulled into a small private apartment complex, parked. A few minutes later, a man came out, tall, athletic build, mid-30s. She stepped out, hugged him, then kissed him. The world didn't stop, but it might as well have. He felt something crack inside him, clean, deep. Not just heartbreak. It was betrayal layered over years of trust. The kind of pain that didn't roar. It whispered, cold and sharp. He didn't confront her that night. He went home before she did. Laid awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to the clock tick until dawn. When she walked in the next morning, she acted like nothing had happened. Kissed his cheek, made coffee, asked about the kids. He watched her closely. How easily she wore her mask. How smoothly she slid into the role of mother, wife, homemaker. He didn't understand how someone could live that kind of double life. He needed answers. So he waited until she was out one afternoon and checked her laptop. She rarely logged out. In her email were a string of messages, coded, careful, but obvious in context. Flight confirmations, a hotel reservation in another state, a message that chilled him to the bone. I can't wait to start our life together. Everything's almost in place. I'll talk to my lawyer this week. There were mentions of custody, of a plan, of timing the move right so it wouldn't raise flags. She wasn't just cheating. She was planning to leave and take their kids with her. The next day, he met with a lawyer. He started documenting everything: texts, emails, voicemails, timestamps. He filed a motion to restrict relocation, quietly transferred joint assets into a protected account, set up security cameras, called a child psychologist for the boys. He didn't confront her. Not yet. Not until the legal protection was in place. When he finally did, it wasn't a fight. It was a controlled burn. He waited until the kids were at school, sat her down, pulled out the printed emails, the photos, the call logs. He didn't raise his voice, didn't cry, just looked her in the eyes and asked, "How long?" Her face went pale. She tried to deny it at first, then minimize it. It wasn't serious. It just happened. I didn't mean for it to go this far. But he saw it in her eyes, the truth, bare and unfiltered. "You were going to take them," he said. "You were going to leave." She didn't answer, just looked away. For the first time in their entire relationship, he didn't feel love when he looked at her, just an overwhelming sense of loss, like standing in the ruins of a home he had spent years building with his bare hands. And now, all of it, gone. She sat in silence for a long time, eyes flickering over the evidence he laid out across the kitchen table. The very table they'd once used for homework sessions with the boys, for birthday cakes, for late-night snacks when they couldn't sleep. Now it was a battlefield of truth. Her hands trembled, and when she finally spoke, her voice was thin, barely more than a whisper. "I didn't mean for it to be like this." He said nothing. There was nothing left to say, really. He had rehearsed a dozen versions of this confrontation. Angry ones, emotional ones, even ones where he broke down completely, but now that he was here, it all felt strangely calm. Numb, even. "How long?" he asked again. She swallowed hard. "About 8 months." He closed his eyes. 8 months. That meant birthdays, holidays, family movie nights, all while she was building a second life behind his back. She tried to explain. Said it started with innocent conversations. Said he was someone she met through Tina's office. Worked in accounting, helped with a few fundraising events. Claimed she never meant to fall for him. That he listened, paid attention, made her feel like more than just a mother or a wife stuck in routine. The words hit him like pebbles thrown against a brick wall. He heard them, but they didn't break through. He asked her if the boys had ever met him. She shook her head quickly. "No, never. I would never do that." But that didn't reassure him. Not when she had already planned to uproot their lives. Not when she had booked flights and drafted emails to a lawyer about custody. "I was going to tell you," she said, her voice breaking. I didn't know how." He stood up and walked away, not because he didn't want to hear it, but because he didn't want to see her cry. Her tears weren't his responsibility anymore. That night, he slept in the guest room. The silence between them stretched so long it felt like a living thing. She didn't knock on his door, didn't come to ask if he was okay, and in a way, that silence told him everything. Over the next few days, everything shifted. They moved through the house like strangers, communicating only about the boys. Did you pack his lunch? Practice is at 5. He needs help with homework. He noticed she stopped going out at night. Her phone barely left her hand, though, and she kept it face down on every surface. The house felt colder, not just from tension, but from something deeper, a total collapse of trust. The lawyer advised him to remain calm, not to move out, and to maintain the appearance of normalcy for the children. They'd begun the custody process, and while he wasn't seeking full custody at first, he now considered it. Not out of revenge, but out of fear. If she was capable of planning to leave the country, with the boys without saying a word, what else might she do? He also installed a security system. She didn't say anything about it, but she noticed. The first time she walked in and saw the blinking light on the new panel, she paused, hesitated, then walked past it. He didn't ask her if she was still seeing the other man. He already knew the answer. The messages stopped coming to their shared devices, but her demeanor didn't change. She still stayed up late on her laptop, still spent long hours going for walks or running vague errands that took more time than they should. He began therapy, mostly to cope with the rage building inside him. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the years of sacrifice, of love poured into a shared life, only for it to be traded in silence for someone new. A stranger. A man who hadn't changed diapers at 2 a.m. A man who hadn't weathered job losses or mortgage stress, or the panic of waiting in emergency rooms with a feverish child. The therapist said it was normal to feel grief. That betrayal in a long marriage was a kind of death. And he felt that, like he was mourning someone who was still alive, still living in the same house, still setting the same table every morning, now with hands he no longer recognized. One evening, their older son walked in on them mid-argument. Nothing loud, just tense voices and bitter words muttered in the kitchen. The boy paused, eyes wide, and asked, "Are you guys getting a divorce?" They froze. She said, "No, sweetheart, we're just talking." But her voice was shaky, and their son didn't believe her. Later that night, he tucked both boys into bed. He looked at their small faces, their innocence, and felt a weight settle on his chest. They didn't deserve this. They didn't deserve to live in a house filled with quiet resentments and tension they couldn't understand. He knew then that something had to change, fast. He asked her the next day if they could talk, really talk. Not about blame or lawyers or what went wrong, just about the boys. She agreed. They sat in the backyard while the kids were at a neighbor's house. He told her plainly that if she wanted to be with this other man, he wouldn't stop her. But she wasn't going to take the boys without a fight. She looked startled. "I never wanted to take them from you. You just didn't want me to know you were leaving with them?" She looked away. He told her he had filed a motion to prevent any travel without his consent, that the bank accounts were now protected, that he had retained full documentation of everything. She said nothing for a long time. Then finally she whispered, "I didn't think it would get this far." He almost laughed, as if affairs came with warning signs and safe exits. In the days that followed, they agreed to separate formally. She would move in with her sister temporarily. He would stay with the boys in the house. She insisted she would stay close, be involved, still be a mother. But something about her felt distant now, like she had already mentally moved on. He didn't stop her. He had stopped trying to change the course of something she had chosen, long before he knew it had even begun. As he packed up her things into boxes, clothes, books, framed pictures, they felt like artifacts from a past life. He didn't cry. Not then. He was beyond tears. He was in a place where the ache was dull but deep, like a wound healing under skin that would never feel the same. When she finally left, she kissed the boys and hugged them tight. She didn't look at him as she walked out the door, just said she'd be back in 2 days to pick them up for the weekend. He watched her car pull away and felt a strange mixture of grief and relief. Grief for what was lost, relief for what was no longer hidden. The house was quiet again, but this time it wasn't a lonely silence. It was a clean one. He sat on the edge of the couch that night, surrounded by stillness. No more waiting for late-night texts, no more questioning her every movement, no more checking voicemails with a sinking heart. The betrayal had gutted him, but in its place came something steadier. Resolve. He would rebuild, not out of anger, not out of spite, but because his children deserved a father who wasn't drowning in doubt, because he deserved a life not shaped by someone else's secrets. And slowly, the pieces would begin to fall into place again. He stood in front of the mirror one morning, adjusting the collar of his shirt, when he realized he didn't look the same anymore. There were lines around his eyes now, deeper than before. A kind of hardness in his face that hadn't been there 6 months ago. But there was something else, too. Clarity. A quiet strength that came from surviving something he once thought would destroy him. It had been 3 weeks since she moved out. The boys adjusted better than he expected. Maybe kids just sensed when the tension was finally gone. There were no more arguments behind closed doors, no more hushed phone calls or long silences at the dinner table. Things weren't perfect, far from it, but the home felt real again. Honest. He picked them up from school every afternoon, helped with their homework, cooked dinner, and read to them at night. The routines grounded him. They reminded him of what still mattered, and every time his youngest threw his arms around his neck or his eldest asked for advice, he felt a reason to keep going. They were his anchor now. But outside the house, things were changing fast. The divorce proceedings moved forward. She had initially agreed to joint custody, but something shifted when she found out he had safeguarded the accounts and set legal restrictions on travel. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the man she had been seeing whispering in her ear. Either way, her tone changed during their latest mediation meeting. She accused him of controlling behavior, brought up moments from the past, twisting them to fit a new narrative. Said he was distant and emotionally absent, claiming the marriage had been dead long before the affair began. He listened, let her speak, but he knew the truth, and more importantly, so did the people close to them. His lawyer remained calm, countering every claim with documented facts. Shared therapy attempts she had canceled, receipts, call logs, even the booking confirmations of her planned trip with the boys. The judge wasn't fooled. What surprised him most, though, was the appearance of someone unexpected. Tina, her best friend. She reached out to him one afternoon, asking if they could talk. They met in a small cafe not far from where their kids had once played together during summer picnics. Tina looked uncomfortable, fidgeting with the edge of her napkin. Then, after a long pause, she told him the man his wife had been seeing, her co-worker, was not just a fling. They had plans, serious ones. She had been looking into jobs abroad. She wanted a fresh start. And the worst part? She had filed paperwork behind his back weeks before the confrontation, trying to establish legal guardianship to move the boys with her if the custody ruling didn't go her way. Tina apologized, said she didn't agree with it, which was why she'd finally come forward. She had warned his wife, told her it was wrong, told her she was being reckless, but loyalty had its limits, and Tina's conscience had gotten louder than her friendship. He thanked her, not with anger or resentment, just a quiet kind of gratitude. She didn't have to come forward, but she did. He brought the information to his lawyer the next day, and together they filed for primary custody. It wasn't revenge, it was protection. He didn't want to keep the boys from their mother. He just didn't trust her judgment anymore. The court hearings were long and exhausting. He had to listen to accusations, to half-truths delivered with tears. But every time he wanted to interrupt, to stand and defend himself, his lawyer would place a calming hand on his arm. "Let the truth speak," she'd say. And it did. Witnesses came forward. Neighbors who'd noticed the late-night visitors. Teachers who had sensed the boys were anxious during the months she'd grown distant. Even financial analysts who testified about the accounts being accessed in unusual ways. In the end, the ruling came down in his favor. He was granted primary custody with shared visitation rights. The judge commended him for his stability, for acting in the best interests of the children. She warned his ex-wife that any further attempts to leave the country without legal consent would result in serious consequences. After court, she didn't look at him. She gathered her things and walked out, her attorney trailing behind her. No goodbye, no apology. But again, he didn't expect one. That chapter was over. In the weeks that followed, he took a few days off work to focus on the boys. They went camping, just the three of them. Cooked hot dogs over a fire, told ghost stories, watched stars in a sky that stretched out in silent forgiveness. And for the first time in what felt like forever, he slept without waking up to anxiety. There were nights, though, when the memories came back. Her laugh, their wedding day, the hospital room when they held their first son. Those things didn't just vanish. They were part of him, part of his story, and he didn't push them away anymore. He let them sit beside him like ghosts, quiet but no longer haunting. Some friends encouraged him to start dating again. Others said it was too soon. He didn't know what the right answer was, but he knew he wasn't the same person who had walked into that kitchen months ago with trembling hands and printed messages. He had learned something powerful, that love doesn't always last, but integrity can, that you can lose a marriage without losing yourself. He focused on rebuilding, not just his life, but his heart. Day by day, not rushing, not chasing something to fill the void. Just learning how to breathe again, to laugh with his kids, to trust people slowly, to look in the mirror and see someone who survived. One afternoon, months later, he received a message from his ex-wife. Just a few lines. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I hope someday you find peace. Thank you for being the father our children need. He didn't reply, not out of anger, but because he already had found peace, and it didn't require her acknowledgement. He stood in the backyard that evening watching his sons play soccer. Their laughter echoed through the air like music. The sun dipped behind the trees, casting long shadows over the lawn. He smiled, truly smiled, and for the first time in a long while, it wasn't a mask. It was the beginning of something new. Not a clean slate, but a stronger one, forged through heartbreak, anchored by truth, and moving forward, always forward with nothing to hide and everything still to live for.